So welcome everyone. My name is Carrie Sweeney. I'm the director of the UC Berkeley Retirement Center, and I'm pleased to welcome Sita Wong, who is a doctor of physical therapy with experience in hospital and home health settings. She's also a certified senior advisor and provides personal guidance to help you and your family um, navigate long-term care, prepare essential documents, and maintain your well-being. Many of you might be familiar with the extensive support that UC offers as UC retirees navigating Medicare and healthcare issues through the Healthcare Facilitator Program. Though CETA service and group education can provide additional one-on-one attention for a fee. Today, Sita will share her knowledge on practical steps for preparing for emergencies with confidence. And I want to give thanks to our advisory board chair, Stephen Andrews, who's trained as a neighborhood emergency response team volunteer, for his contribution as well as today's session. At the end of this session today, we'll provide some additional information about a program that he and Sita are planning together on critical documents. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Sita, who we're happy to have here today.
All righty, thank you, Carrie. Let me just make sure you can all see the slides for today. All righty, is everybody able to see my screen? Yes, okay, good. Give me 1 second to move some things around. Alrighty, so again, thank you everybody for being here today. As Carrie mentioned, my name is Sita Wong, and I am, well, first and foremost, a doctor of physical therapy. I've worked in hospitals and home health, and I'm now I've been a certified senior advisor to kind of just help seniors work through a lot more things that a lot of them haven't quite expected to think about. So today we're going to talk about emergency preparedness and whether or not you and your family are ready for one. So there's a lot to cover today. If you do have questions throughout this presentation, please add them specifically to the Q&A part, not the chat itself, but just the Q&A, because Carrie is going to help me figure out what are the most common questions, and then we'll answer those at the very end. There is also a point where I do ask for your participation, so if you could please, in the regular chat, just type in your answer to that question. All right, so let's get started. So imagine you're out running errands, taking a walk in your local park, and all of a sudden your phone buzzes and you get an emergency alert saying that you need to evacuate your home. At this point, you have minutes to act. Would you know what to do? Would you know what to grab? And would your loved ones be ready? There we go. So last month, over 200,000 people in Los Angeles had to evacuate, and more than 10,000 homes were destroyed in the fire. California is no stranger to disasters, with 90% of residents living in high-risk areas for wildfires and earthquakes. But the bigger problem is that only 40% of those people actually have an emergency plan. Now, the good news is a little preparation can go a long way. So emergency planning doesn't actually have to be complicated and stressful. And so today, my hope is that by the end of this session, you will walk away knowing exactly how to protect not only yourself, your home, and your loved ones, all while not having to feel overwhelmed in this process. All right, so this is where I want to hear from you. My question to you is, what is one thing that you have already done to prepare for an emergency? And if you haven't done anything, please feel free to share that as well. All right, let's just see.
Use the chat feature to do that.
Yeah, regular chat, not the Q&A. All righty, nice. All right, I'm just reading these as they come in. People are getting their go bags, water and food storage, paperwork. Okay, this is perfect. This is perfect. Yes, all the things we want to hear. Okay, good. So if some of you are actually keeping up with everything that's going on in the chat, you can see that everybody's preparedness looks a little bit different. And that's exactly why we're doing this presentation today, to cover a variety of things in order to help you feel more confident and ready. 22-year-old go bag. Okay, I like it. All right, so here we go. We're going to continue because, as I said, there's a lot to cover. I'm not going to be able to get into too many details on things just because there is so much to cover. But if you do have more detailed questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A part of the chat, not the regular chat. All right, so here we go. So for our agenda for today, we're first going to go over how to prepare your actual home for an emergency. We're going to talk about how to prepare your car. We're then going to talk about, as some of you have already done, preparing your go bag. We will then talk about creating your emergency and communication plan, either for yourself or your family. Various community resources that are available to you, your next steps on what to do, and then finally we'll have the Q&A. So, as we discuss preparing your home for emergencies, we're going to cover 4 different areas. We're first going to cover fires, then earthquakes, power outages, and then finally, unfortunately, if you ever have to deal with a home insurance claim, how to start preparing for that. All right, so first up is fire safety. Now, for outside your home, the first thing, and one of the things you do want to do, is create what we call, or at least what CAL FIRE considers, defensible space. And the defensible space in what you do is going to be based on different zones that CAL FIRE has established. Now, in addition to creating that defensible space, some of it, and this might only apply to some of you, but it's essentially clearing anywhere from 300 or 30 to 100 feet of brush and other flammable materials around your property. Now, for some of you, you might have this amount of space. I know where I live, I barely have probably 50 feet until my next door neighbor, maybe even 20. So this is just a recommendation by CAL FIRE. It's not going to necessarily be applied to every single person, but the CAL FIRE website will be a good place to look at what you need to do in certain zones. In addition, you might want to invest, again, depending on if you own versus rent your property, into fire-resistant landscaping and materials because they can add an extra layer of protection. All right, next up is inside your home. So when it comes to inside your home, first you want to know where your fire extinguishers are. Now, if you don't have a fire extinguisher, you will want to get a fire extinguisher. In addition, you want to regularly check to make sure your fire extinguishers are still full, that they're not empty, and also that your smoke detectors are still working. All right, now, if you use a mobility aid and need to get around your home with that mobility aid, and when I say mobility aid, I mean cane, crutches, walker, or wheelchair. What you're going to want to do is make sure that you always have a clear pathway, especially to whichever exit you are going to use. You want to make sure that, like, if you're either going out your front door or you're going out your back door, you want to make sure that there's nothing in the way, like boxes or big pieces of furniture, or that you can't even open the door. So make sure that your pathways are clear for you to fit, along with your mobility aid, to leave your home. Next up is that, depending again on the type of mobility aid that you use and your physical function, you want to make sure that your exit routes are accessible for you. So if you're somebody who is wheelchair bound, then you want to make sure maybe that your exits are physically wide enough for the wheelchair to fit through. So that might mean you have to widen the doorway a little bit. If you're somebody who can't navigate stairs for whatever reason, you might want to consider installing a ramp. So things like this, just to make sure that your exit is accessible for whatever your needs are. Now, this is everything for fire. Again, as I said, we're going to quickly move through things today. All right, now next up we have earthquakes. So one thing is that you want to make sure that you secure the following: heavy furniture, appliances, and water heaters. So all of these you want to secure to the wall just in case during a big earthquake they don't fall over. Now, this website right here is a very, very good resource to go to figure out how to actually secure those items. People have different pieces of heavy furniture and appliances and water heaters, and this website actually breaks down how to go about securing different items to the wall. All right, with earthquakes, you also want to identify your safe spots. As kids, we are taught you need to essentially duck and cover. So that's what this safe spot is you want to figure out where you have sturdy enough furniture, most likely a table or a desk that you can duck and cover under. Now, in addition to knowing where to go, you also want to know areas to avoid. So these are the hazard zones. This includes area near heavy furniture, especially if it's not secured to the wall. And that's because you don't want to be somewhere where there's a piece of heavy furniture that could potentially fall on top of you. Yes, you might be covered by something secure like a desk or a table, but you never know what could happen. The second hazard zone is anywhere near windows. During very big earthquakes, windows can shatter, and that falling glass can land on top of you and give you lots of cuts. So try and avoid areas near windows as well. And again, just like with fire safety, if you use a mobility aid, which is canes, crutches, walkers, wheelchairs, you want to make sure your pathways are clear. If you're in one room that doesn't have something sturdy enough for you to duck and cover under, you need to make sure that if you had to quickly go from one room to another, you wouldn't have to navigate around random rugs or bags or something like that in your hallway. Next up is, again, depending on your functional mobility, you want to designate or create a safe spot for you to duck and cover under. Now, this is something that you can figure out as a family. It's something you can reach out to other people, but you do want to think about, okay, can you get onto the floor? And then can you get off the floor and stuff like that? All right, so this is basically the summary of everything to do in preparation for an earthquake, and we are now going to move on to power outages. So with power outages, you want to stock up and actually know the location of the following things. You want to know where your flashlights are, your extra batteries for your flashlights, solar chargers or lanterns if you use them. And something that, even when I was a kid, we did this, but you're not supposed to. Do not use anything with an open flame during a power outage. So that includes candles, lighters, that kind of stuff. It is not safe. You also might want to consider a generator, especially if you or somebody in your household relies on medical equipment like oxygen concentrators, ventilators, infusion pumps, and that kind of stuff. Now, if you do decide to get a generator, you want to make sure that you do not put the generator inside the house. It actually needs to go outside the house. And then dues for power outages, you want to make sure that you unplug big appliances and electronics. If the power does turn back on its own, you want to make sure that you're not going to create any type of surge and then destroy whatever appliance or electronic that is plugged into the wall. And then you also want to keep your fridge and freezer door shut. As probably a lot of you know, the more that you open it, the temperature is going to go up, which is then going to make your food spoil sooner. Now, a big don't in power outages is do not use your gas stove for heat. This is a very dangerous thing, so do not use a gas stove for heat. All right, so we've talked about fires, talked about earthquakes, talked about power outages. We're now going to talk about preparing for if you ever have to do a home insurance claim. Now, when it comes time to submit any type of claim to your home insurance, you want to document all of your belongings. Now, I know all of your belongings is a lot, so the quickest and easiest way to do this is to essentially take your phone, put it on film, and then walk around and film everything in your home. Now, not only do I want you to do that, I also want you to open every single drawer, every single cabinet, and every single closet and film what you have in there as well, because you want to have everything in your home, at least somewhere saved. Now, when you do save this, it's probably going to be saved to your phone, but also save it to other places. Save it into the cloud, into your email, send it to your significant other or your kids, because you're going to want to have multiple places where it's saved, because if you don't, it's very possible that you could lose your phone and then you don't have that anymore. Now, a more organized but a significantly more time-consuming way to do this is to actually list out every single item's name, description, brand, and then either the exact or estimated cost. Now, this is very time consuming, but it is very, very important. And when you do this, you want to be as specific as possible. So, home insurance companies do not want to give you as much money as you request or say that you lost in a fire. They want to give you the least amount of money possible. So the more specific you can be, the more money you can get back. So for example, let's say in your kitchen you lost a toaster. Now, if you just put on your form toaster and no other descriptors, your home insurance company is probably going to go to a website like Target or Walmart. They're going to find the cheapest toaster, and then they will actually look for the wholesale price of the toaster, not the retail price of the toaster. So that whatever toaster you actually had, you might only get $5 back for. Now, let's say you were even more specific and you said, oh, well, the toaster I have is a Breville mini smart oven with 8 different cooking functions. Now, that's much more specific, so the home insurance company will actually have to actually look that up and figure out what that price is. And just so you know, that toaster is $250. So you can either potentially get $5 back from the insurance company or $250. So it kind of just shows you the more specific you are, the more money you can get back. Now, a middle ground option, because again, that option where you list every single item is very, very time consuming. The middle ground option is where you basically create the list and you choose a certain item worth or dollar amount to use. So let's say you're only going to list items over $200 or maybe just $100. But just note that those smaller items that you're maybe just say, oh, it's printer paper, it's paper clips, it's forks and knives. Those things, the insurance company will find ways to give you as little money as possible. So in summary, document as many belongings as you can and be as specific as possible. All right, so we are moving away from preparing your home and we are now going to talk about how to prepare your car. With that, we're going to talk about emergency kit essentials. We're going to talk about personal items, and then we're going to also talk about maintaining your car. So first off is the car emergency kit essentials, which is basically a very comprehensive car emergency kit. Now you're going to have car specific items such as jumper cables, tire repair kit, and flares and stuff like that. But then you're also going to want non-car specific items such as first aid kit, blankets, flashlights, ropes, and stuff like that. You might also want to consider navigation and communication items. So during big power outages or natural disasters, we don't always know if our cellular service is going to work on our phones. So you might want to have physical maps. Also portable radios, especially if the radio in your car isn't working. And then especially if there is that power outage and you can't actually plug your phone into an outlet, you're going to want to have some type of way to charge your phone. Whether or not it is a car charger or just a separate power bank is totally up to you. Now, next up is personal items. And again, because we don't have too much time, I'm going to basically breeze through these because these same items are essentially items that go in your go bag. So you have personal hygiene items like wet wipes, toiletries, toilet paper, that kind of stuff. You're going to have clothing and medical items, such as making sure you have an extra pair of clothes, sturdy shoes, glasses, contacts, hearing aids, medications, weather-specific items like either sunscreens or hats, umbrellas or ponchos. And then you're also, oh, if you have pets, don't forget about your pets. So you want to make sure that you bring their food, their leash, their toys, small waste bags, especially for dogs too. All right, moving on. Oh yeah, and as I mentioned, this is essentially everything that would go into your go bag anyways, so I will go into more detail when we hit the go bag. This is just kind of a little intro to it. All right, next is to always maintain your car. The last thing you want to happen is where you've packed up your car, your home's safe as it can be, you have your go bag, but your car won't actually start or it's not safe to drive. So with that in mind, in your car, you want to make sure you have a spare tire and either spider or lug wrench. Now, I will say Some of the newer hybrid cars, maybe even electric cars too, they don't actually have a spare tire. So if that's the case, you will probably at least want to have a tire repair kit. Even if you do have a spare tire, it doesn't hurt to have this as well. Um, if you really want to, you can also include a car jack if it will fit in your car. And then a good habit to have is to keep your gas tank half full or half empty, however you want to think about it, at all times. And that way it will just save you time if you do need to evacuate and you don't need to worry about stopping at a gas station. And then lastly, you want to have your regular oil maintenance checks and stuff like that, just to make sure that your car is running the way it needs to, it is still safe to drive, and there's no worries should an emergency happen. Alrighty, so we have now talked about how to prepare your home and how to prepare your car. So we're now going to move into how to prepare your go bag. And it sounds like a good chunk of you have already put together your go bag. So for those of you who already have it, maybe this will kind of be a review. And for those of you who don't have a go bag, this will be a very, very good intro on what to actually put in there. So for your go bag, you want to think about the 4 Ps. We've got provisions, personal needs, paperwork, and practical items. Now, some of these will kind of overlap, but these are just general 4 Ps that'll help you remember it. Now, for those of you that don't know, what is a go bag? It is basically your grab and go solution in emergencies. And it is a pre-packed bag designed to hold everything to keep you safe and comfortable for at least 72 hours. So again, 72 hours, not 24 hours, 72 hours. And again, as I said, when packing your go bag, you want to remember the 4 Ps: provisions, personal needs, paperwork, and practical items. So let's break it down. First is provisions. So we need to make sure that you have enough food and water to last you at least 72 hours. Now, with water, that means you need to pack 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days. Now, in terms of food, you want to pack non-perishable food. Now, the amount is more so up to you and whoever else is in your family. Some people eat a lot of food, some people don't eat a lot of food. So think about how much you eat in a 24-hour period and then multiply it by 3. And that's how much food you should take. When you are taking food, take non-perishable items. So things such as canned or jarred foods, protein bars, dehydrated meals if you can, dried foods, especially ones high in protein like nuts, jerky. You can also bring like dried fruit. Then you also want to bring some tools with you, and tools specifically would be a first aid kit, flashlight with extra batteries, a handy and reliable multi-tool for, well, multi-use, uh, a manual can opener if you are bringing canned goods, a whistle for communication, especially if like there's a lot of smoke during a fire and you yourself can't yell for any help. Whistles are a lot easier to hear than somebody yelling for help. And then lastly, PPE. So gloves, mask, and safety goggles, especially if there is a fire, as a lot of us have experienced in the Bay Area and LA. N95s, not just your regular surgical masks, but N95s to help protect your lungs. All right, so moving away from provisions, we now have personal needs. So with the personal needs, you have your medical related items. So first thing is to make sure you have a 7-day supply of your medications. I know this bag is only for 72 hours, but just in case, have a 7-day supply of your medications in labeled containers. So a lot of individuals nowadays just use those like little pill boxes. Sometimes if you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then they're even, well, bigger. But use that to put your medications in, and that way you have it all in one place. You also want to have a printed list of your medications and the dosages that you take just in case. Now, if you wear glasses, bring an extra pair of glasses. If you wear contacts like me, I have, well, actually, an extra pair of glasses, my contacts, and contact solution. If you wear hearing aids, bring your hearing aid or have an extra pair of hearing aids if you have them, and extra batteries for those hearing aids as well. In terms of clothing, make sure you have extra sets of clothing. And again, this can depend on you and your personal preference. You could have one set of clothing, you could have three sets of clothing. You also want sturdy shoes. So I've worked with a lot of seniors in the home, and a lot of them like to wear slippers. Now, in an emergency, slippers are not the best thing to have. Now, if you don't have the time to change your shoes, then you can leave your home with slippers, but in your go bag should be a pair of sturdy shoes. And this could just be tennis shoes or something like that. And the reason why you want that is you never know how long you're going to be away from your home, and you don't know where you're going. Sometimes maybe you can go to a relative's house and you know their floors are clean, but maybe you don't have a relative to go to and you're going to a public shelter that happens to be outdoors or in a parking lot. So having slippers in those situations is not a good idea. All right, next up is weather appropriate items. So if it is hot and sunny and we're probably dealing with fires, well, sunscreen and a hat might be a good idea. If it is more so raining and cold and we're dealing with earthquakes and floods, umbrellas and ponchos are probably going to be better. And then also just having a good sturdy pair of gloves, whether or not it's to keep your hands warm or to just kind of help lift things, carry things, regardless, a sturdy pair of gloves will help. All right, personal hygiene. Within here, we've got wet wipes, hand sanitizer, small garbage bags to act as a garbage bag or something else, your personal toiletries, your toothbrush, toilet paper. So all of these things, or even tissues if it's too difficult to pack toilet paper since they come in large rounds. All of these things are going to be very, very helpful and something that you're going to want in your go bag. All right, the third P is paperwork. So you are going to want to bring different forms of identification with you, and those include your driver's license, your passport, social security card if you can, and your Medicare card. So any other forms of ID you just want to bring with you to have. You want an actual printed copy of your emergency plan, which we will actually go over in a couple of slides. And then critical documents binder. Carrie mentioned earlier that Steve and I will actually be doing a separate series and presentation in March on the critical documents binder, so I'm not going to go into details here, but just to give you a general idea, this critical documents binder should have copies of all your identifications, either the original or copies of your advanced healthcare directive, CPR directive, and or DNR order, depending on your wishes. Insurance policies, everything from home and auto to medical to pet to life insurance, financial and banking information, and a lot more. Now, a big thing to remember is that not only do you want this in a paper form, but you also want all of this in a digital form. So again, depending on your physical strength and ability, maybe carrying a box or bin or binder of a lot of papers is too heavy. So if that's the case, as long as you have a digital copy, you can just save it on one of those teeny tiny little USB drives about yay big. If you have one of those can easily fit in your pocket and is not as heavy as carrying all the papers. Alrighty, so the last P we are going to talk about is practical items. So you're going to want small bills in cash, just in case ATMs are down or there is no server or power to pay with a credit card. You also might want to have other forms of communication. Well, one being you want something to charge your phone if the service on your phone is working. You might want to consider a two-way radio. But again, if you're going to get a two-way radio, you want to think about the distance that they're going to work. Do they work within only a couple 100 feet, or can they work miles away from each other? And then if you're a little bit more serious, then an emergency satellite phone. Now, comfort items. A lot of people, when they lose their homes, they say that the one thing they wish they had were photo albums. So it might be a good idea to pick which photo albums you know you want to take with you should you have to evacuate your home. And you can easily do this now. Maybe you kind of combine photos from different albums. And that will be the one or two albums that you take with you if you have to evacuate. Next is to bring either a book or like a game or a puzzle, something to help distract you and help reduce your stress. Because during a lot of these natural disasters, it's just a waiting game of can we go home? Yes or no? What has happened? Like we just don't know. So it's a very long waiting game sometime. All right. Now, no two people are the same, which also means no two go bags are the same. So again, you want to make sure that every go bag is personalized to you individually. So with that in mind, if somebody has a mobility aid, and again, it will depend on the type of mobility aid, but if you have, let's say you use a cane, you know how there's those like little plastic or rubber tips at the very bottom of your cane? If you have extras of those, put them in your go bag. If you use a walker. Now, let's say you use more like a rollator, but you can't fit your rollator walker in your car, then just get what we call a front wheeled walker, which is those silver ones that people put tennis balls on the bottoms of. Um, and now if you normally use that walker and you put tennis balls on there, bring a couple extra tennis balls. For people who use wheelchairs, if you have a very specific wheelchair cushion that you sit on, get an extra one and put it in the car. If you do use a manual wheelchair, which is the most typical one people use inside the home, those things, as your family has potentially learned or your caregivers, they're very hard to push outside. So you might want to consider getting something called a transport wheelchair, which is much, much lighter, easier to fit into your car, and a lot easier for somebody to push you in. Now, if you use a electric wheelchair that's powered by some type of motor, you might want to also pack an extra battery for that wheelchair. Alrighty, so separate the mobility aids. Again, if you have pets, make sure to pack stuff for your pets. So you are going to want at least 1 gallon of water per pet per day, their food, their leash, toys, and small trash bags. Now, with your go bags, you also want to remember to rotate perishable items, specifically food and medications. These are not meant to last decades on end or even months on end, so make sure that you do go through and rotate those items so that you're not eating expired food or expired medications. And the last thing is that these go bags need to be very, very accessible. So most likely you want to store them in near an exit. You don't want to store them in your attic or somewhere buried in your closet or under your bed. You want them to be as accessible as possible, just in case, let's say something's wrong with your house and you need to quickly just get to one of the exits, grab the bag and go. And then the last thing is that because there is so much that needs to go into this go bag, even though it's called a go bag, it might be more than just one physical bag. At least for me, I have a backpack and 2 bins that I use as my go bag. So whatever works for you, you don't actually have to go out and buy something. Like the backpack that I use as my go bag is a backpack that I had when I played volleyball in high school, just because it's a good backpack and it fits a lot of things. So you can either go out and buy something or you can just use what you already have. All right, so that sums up the go bag. So we're now going to move on to creating your emergency plan. Now, the first thing you want to do is establish your contacts. And the reason why that is important is because during specifically natural disasters that affect hundreds, if not thousands of people, you cannot rely on 911. You need to rely on individuals that know you personally. So with that, you want to designate an in-state contact to help coordinate things in your area. Um, and in addition to an in-state contact, and you might not need this, is an out-of-state contact. Now, you could, like, if you live in the Bay Area, you could potentially choose somebody in Southern California because we are far enough from each other. But if something were to happen and affect the entire state of California, you will want somebody who is outside the state of California to contact as well. In addition to these 2 contacts, you also want to list out 3 additional people to contact and keep informed. And that's just in case either of those first 2 contacts aren't available, or just to have more people be informed about where you are and how you're doing. Next up is you cannot rely on phone calls. Phone calls, especially the service for a phone call, can be very iffy. So instead of phone calls, the best way to communicate with your family would actually be a text or a group text. You could use apps as well, like WhatsApp. You can use your two-way radios. You can use emergency satellite phones, things like that. Sorry, hold on. Step 2 is establishing meeting points, and you're going to want at least 3 meeting points. So the first one is your primary meeting spot, and it's going to be really close to your home. It might literally be your front driveway, or if you don't want it to literally be your home, it could be your neighbor's, like the sidewalk in front of your neighbor's house or something like that. Next up is your secondary meeting spot. So let's say something happened to your entire block or something like that. You want to have another meeting spot that's in your general neighborhood, in case something were to happen to you, and you can use that as a meeting spot for you and your family. The last one is if the whatever natural disaster or emergency has happened has affected your entire neighborhood. Well, at that point, you might want to consider having a landmark or a building that you can meet at that everybody knows and knows how to get to that is either in the same city or the same county. Now, I know a lot of us have, the Bay Area has massive counties, so maybe just choose a city that's relatively close to yours. So those are the first 2 steps with your emergency plan. Next up, you want to actually physically create your emergency plan. So you want to designate the emergency contacts and choose your meeting points. You want to have alert systems in place, which I'll talk about in the next slide. You want to have your home evacuation route. You want to assign and write out specific roles and responsibilities for each family member. So maybe one person is responsible for putting all the go bags in the car, and the other person is responsible for getting the dog and the cat together or something like that. Next is you want to have a supply checklist of all of the items in your go bag and in your car emergency kit, just so when the time comes, if you're like, okay, I don't remember if we brought this or that, you have a checklist of everything in there. Now, the last thing you want to do is practice your plan. So you want to do this at least 2 times a year, and this will allow you to test your evacuation routes and your communication strategies and see if there's any holes in your emergency plan so that you can fix them now and not during an emergency. You also want to practice your evacuation route. So not only physically evacuating the area of your home, but also how do you get out of your house? And this is very, very important for people who have mobility aids and mobility needs. If you have any of these, again, cane, crutches, walker, wheelchair, you want to practice physically leaving your home with your mobility aid, both during the day and at night. Because different, well, day and night can provide different conditions. One you can see, one sometimes you can't see. Now, if the person who has the mobility aid requires physical assistance from another person, whether it's lightly holding onto their arm or maybe they are completely wheelchair bound, you want to have a designated person, and ideally one who can easily get to you. So either somebody in the same household or maybe a neighbor. You don't want to choose your daughter or grandson or something who lives 15 miles away because they won't be able to get to you fast enough. You want somebody who could probably get to you within maybe 5 to 10, less than 5 to 10 minutes. So you want to designate who that is. You want to make sure they are trained to help you physically get out of the house. And then you want to practice with that designated person at getting out of your house both during the day and at night. All right, so that wraps up your emergency plan. We're now going to talk about community resources. So first off, you want to make sure you have alert systems in place. For power outages, if you have, you want to look into power shutoff notifications. And this is usually going to be through whichever company supplies your energy and gas. So for a lot of the Bay Area, it's going to be PG&E. For earthquakes, there's a shake alert, and it's actually through what's called the My Shake app, which is an app that you download, and it was actually created by UC Berkeley. You have CAL FIRE notifications for wildfires. Cal Alerts, which allows you to choose your county and get notifications about critical events. And then there's also county-specific alert systems. So every county has a different name, website, or app. So you just want to look up which county you live in and see if they have a specific alert system for you. Next is the emergency preparedness guides and checklists. And so a good website to use is ready.gov, and they have a lot of resources, step-by-step instructions on how to assemble your emergency kit or create your evacuation plan. You also have this other website, which is through CAL FIRE, so it's more specifically how to prepare your home for a fire. Now, another thing I didn't touch too much on, but is evacuation zones. So there is actually a website and an app called Genesis Protect, where you can input your exact address and it will tell you, okay, if something were to happen, this is where you should evacuate to, and if you needed to go to a shelter, this is the shelter you should go to. Next up, we have just general websites to stay informed about things. We have CAL FIRE website, the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program, and National Weather Service. Now, this other website is called Ready America, and it's different than the rest because Ready America is actually a website to purchase emergency-related supplies. Now, you can also use Amazon, but there's so many options on Amazon, so if you get too overwhelmed, you can use Ready America. I will say Ready America tends to be a bit more expensive than Amazon. And then lastly is that either you yourself or maybe a family member should consider taking a first aid and CPR class, just because in an emergency, being able to provide this type of help can be very beneficial to both you, your family, and anybody else. All right, so now that we have gone over pretty much everything, at least generally in order to prepare for an emergency, my question to you, and you do not need to put this in the chat, maybe just make yourself a note. If you have a piece of paper or a sticky note or something, write down what will you do first. Now, this doesn't have to be a big or time-consuming step. It could literally be, do I actually get notifications from CAL FIRE? Or you could choose something like, oh, let me figure out who my emergency contacts are going to be. They don't have to physically require you to do anything, then think about something. If you want to do something bigger, you can decide, hey, let me start making my go bag. So it's totally up to you, but what will be the first thing you are going to do? And depending on that, if it's a small task, have your goal be maybe the end of today or even by the end of the day on Friday. If it's a bigger thing like creating your entire go bag, maybe you want to give it until the end of next week. But again, write out something, okay? Now, the second thing I want you to remember is that emergency preparedness isn't a one-time task. It is an ongoing commitment to planning and practicing and being proactive. And it's not just about protecting yourself, you can also set an example for others. So as you start communicating with your family members, hey, you're going to be my emergency contact for this, is that okay? You're also kind of reminding them like, hey, my aunt or uncle or grandma or grandpa or parents are working on their emergency plan. Maybe I should do the same. So with all of that in mind, your homework is to do one simple task and just do that one task. And then that will start building momentum for you to do more and more tasks coming up. Alrighty, so that wraps up our presentation for today. Thank you all for being here.